everyone, it's Megan and welcome back to my channel. So aside from doing hairstyling videos on this channel, I have been talking more and more about my move from the Philippines to Australia, and a lot of you have given me a lot of questions that I can answer in different videos. So for this video specifically, I will be sharing with you my experiences and some of my tips when it comes to apartment hunting or looking for a place to rent in Australia. Specifically, I'm going to be sharing with you my experience with Brisbane because that's where I live, but I think you'll also find some value in this even though you're looking for a place in Sydney or Melbourne or any other place in the world really. Now, if you're new to my channel, of course, don't forget to do all of the good stuff that supports my channel by liking, subscribing, hitting the bell notification, doing all of those good things because that helps me as a content creator on here. Of course, if you have any questions, just leave them in the comment section below. I'm also on Instagram, so you can find me there. I have a Facebook page as well. So yeah, I guess let's just get into the topic. Okay, so step one of apartment hunting, that's definitely doing your research. When we first got here, we decided to get an Airbnb first, and we decided to get an Airbnb that's right in the middle of the city. And that's because we were aiming for convenience. We wanted somewhere that was easy to access, where we could get, public transportation. We have access to grocery shops, because when we first moved here, we didn't move with any of our stuff, so we didn't really have any furniture or things like that. So we needed somewhere that was already furnished and was available as soon as we landed. We stayed there for about a week or two. We later on moved to another Airbnb for another week, and that Airbnb was in a different suburb. And now suburbs in Australia, I guess if you're in the Philippines, think of it as like neighborhoods or barangays. So each area has its own unique characteristic and its own different vibe. The reason why we went with a different suburb for a second Airbnb is because we wanted to try out different areas and find one that we would kind of like, or at least we'd get to explore the different areas around here first before committing to a location for a long-term period. We were also exploring this entire time, so we were checking out different suburbs, like eating in different restaurants, checking out different cafes, different parks. It just gives us a bit more of a feel for each place, and it shows us what's around those areas. Of course, part of doing your research is also looking at the cost of living for each place. Now, if you're thinking of moving to Brisbane, Brisbane is at a slightly lower cost of living compared to a bigger city like Sydney or Melbourne. However, I think in more recent years, it's not, the difference isn't that big anymore. Brisbane is starting to, go up in pricing, and a lot of people are actually moving here now too. But a quick Google research, and I have my notes here on my laptop. So if I do start to look down, that's because I'm looking at my notes. So I did a super quick research on Google of the average cost of living in Brisbane because I've gotten that question before, and I actually haven't ever thought about that. We just did our research on just the general costs of places. But anyway, one of the results that came up said that to live comfortably in Brisbane, it's about $400 to $750 per week. That's Australian dollars, and that's in Brisbane. So when I think about my expenses on a monthly basis, I would say I might actually be a bit more than that, and that's because I do have other things I like to do on a weekly basis, like going to the gym, going to my dance classes, things like that. So things like that do also add up to your cost of living. Of course, again, if you're looking to live in a place like Sydney or Melbourne, they will have higher expenses because they are bigger cities, they're a bit more central. So when you start to do your research, just have a think also about what are the things that you would like to have when you're living in that place. Do you enjoy cafes? I don't know. Do you want to have a gym that's next to you? Do you want to have a shopping center that's next to you? So different areas will be able to provide you with different things. So step two was that we established our budget. Now that we've done our research, we kind of know more or less what the ballpark figures are. We were able to establish our budget. Before you start viewing places, this is very important because then you wouldn't be looking at places that's beyond your price range and end up falling in love with it and then figure out that you can't even live there Yeah. So at the time that we were looking, I wasn't actually working yet, but I kind of knew what the salary for my position would be. So we had an idea of how much I could potentially be earning. Plus, we already knew for sure what John was earning. So we took that into consideration and we kind of just came up with a figure that we thought was a reasonable budget for us. We looked at it on a per week basis because I don't know if this is standard, but the places that I've seen here usually runs on a fortnightly payment schedule. That means every 2 weeks. So contrary to what I'm actually used to, back in the Philippines, I was paying my rent for my condo every month. So that was a monthly payment. And I think they were doing post-dated checks also there. But when I came here, we were sending the money every 2 weeks. It might be a case-to-case basis. It might be whatever is in your terms. Also, if you start looking at real estate websites and do start looking at the pricing, make sure to read it because a lot of them will put the price that is per week. If you see PW, that means per week. So say they would put up $300 per week. That means every fortnight you're gonna need to pay $600. So that's every 2 weeks. And so in a month, you're gonna have to pay $1,200 for the whole rent. Obviously, if you're trying to calculate for your monthly expenses. That's just a little side tip for you because I was initially looking at the websites before and I was getting confused. But anyway, I got around that. I figured it out. Don't get confused like I am. So now that you've set your budget, step 3 is to finally start looking. So where do you look? There are a few places that you can look for apartments and houses if you are looking to rent. If you go online and search on Google, you'll find a few different ones that might offer you, different listings. But the main one that we always look at is a website called Real Estate, and the website is literally realestate.com.au. And that's actually where we found our current flat that we are living in now. Or from that website, you can actually find more property management companies and you can go to their website and see more of their listings as well. Some examples of these property management companies or rental companies are called Ray White, Harcourt. The one we are with is Habitat Properties, and there's a few more others. There's a lot of them. So you can go directly to their website if you want to see more of their properties. If you're, if you kind of feel like you like the places that they've listed so far and you want to see more of their stuff, just have a look. Just have a look and do the research. So what if you have a smaller budget? What are the other options that you have? Can you live with other people? Yes, you can. You have the option to do share housing. So a share house is living with other people. Essentially, that's having roommates, that's having a housemate. You all live in one big flat or one big house and you all share the rental fee. You can find them usually on a website called Gumtree or even Facebook groups, because this is all just information that I found from my fiance John, because when he first moved here to Australia years ago, this was before we met, he was living in a share house with other people. And so he found his, I think, on Gumtree. Yeah, I think his first flatmates were on Gumtree. And also quite probably those were one of his first few friends. One of them actually we still meet up with to this day. But if you look at Gumtree and Facebook groups, you might be able to find if you just search for like share houses. If you go on Facebook groups though, I think different suburbs will have specific Facebook groups. So if you're, for example, looking at different areas, for example, let's say I said earlier a suburb called Highgate Hill. So you'll just have to search on Facebook for share houses in Highgate Hill and there will be a Facebook group for that. Sharing houses here is very common. A lot of people do it. One of my friends used to do it. So you'll definitely have a lot of options, especially if you are looking for something that is more within budget. Okay, so step 4 is the viewing, the application process, and the documents that you might need. So let's kind of break it down first because I think this is a whole chunk and a whole process. First part of it is the viewing. So once you find houses that you wanna potentially live in, it's good for you to view those places, whether it's a house, an apartment, or any other type of property. They don't always look like the pictures that they post on their listing. They make it look pretty because they want to attract more potential tenants, right? So you have to view it. In our case though, we were quite thankful that the place that we chose, this one, looks exactly like the pictures that were on the internet. The only difference was that there were some different decorations, and that was because when we viewed it, there were other people living in it. With viewing, what we tried to do was we tried to schedule 2 or 3 in a day because we wanted to maximize our schedules. Because John was working, he could only do the viewings after office or on weekends, and not all properties have a lot of availabilities for viewings on weekends. I guess because some of them might have current tenants there and the tenants will be there during the inspection schedule, whatever. Apart from that, we were also in a rush because we wanted to move into a flat already quite soon from that time. So we just wanted to see as many as we could. I wouldn't recommend those seeing too much because I think, I don't know, not unless you really couldn't find the place that you're after. But I think after 5, 6 viewings, it does get exhausting and you just kind of like just move into the first place that's available. But you wouldn't want that. You want something that you would want to live in. So just for example, we looked at places in suburbs called Tenerife, New Farm, East Brisbane, and Red Hill. Actually quite liked most of the places that we looked at, and they were all near the city center. That's why we chose those suburbs. The only one that was just not good, and I'm glad that we viewed it, was an apartment in Red Hill. So it was just crazy. Oh my gosh, it did not look like the pictures at all. Yeah, it was just bad. It looked like it hadn't been cleaned for such a long time, and it was just an awkward viewing altogether. When you view them, what's good about it is that you also get to see the neighborhood that's around. You'll kind of see what's around those places, and you get to experience it a bit firsthand. In each place, we at least, I think, went to like a cafe or a restaurant after, just to kind of see what it's like in that local area, and that gave us an idea of which ones we really like. And again, we chose these areas because they're quite close to the city center. That's something that was really important for us at the time because we are new here, so we wanted easy access to the city because that's where most of the shops are. If we wanted to, you know, buy something, if we needed to go to the hospital, if we needed to get groceries, it's all very accessible. But if you have a look at the map, there are other suburbs around that are pretty nice too. So it all just depends on what criteria you have. Maybe you're looking for something that's closer to your work. Maybe you're looking for something that's close to your family. Maybe you're looking for something that has a nice school. Do your research on that and see which suburbs might fit your criteria a bit better. So you've done your viewings, you've seen the places you liked, and you've fallen in love with 1 or 2 of them. What's step 5? Step 5 is putting down the offer or putting through your application. When it came to putting through our application, we just spoke to the property agents and they sent us some forms to fill out. Usually with properties that look really nice and are quite close to city or is quite accessible to a lot of things, you would have other parties that are interested in bidding for that place as well. So when it comes to putting down your offer, you can either decide to go lower if that's your budget, go higher if you want to be competitive, or just match the asking or what's listed on the property listing. That makes sense. For us, we always just offered the rent price because we were pretty happy with that figure, and we just wanted to see if, you know, if it was for us, then we'll get it. If not, we'll just have to find a way around it. In the application itself, I guess you basically need to prove that you are a good tenant and you are able to pay for the rent. So in that application, they would usually ask for things about, this is me, I've listed what I remember from it and what my partner remembers from it. They usually ask about your employment history, your salary, who would be living in the rental, so how many people are there, because some places have a maximum capacity. If you have any pets, because not all places will allow pets. However, you can also just talk to the property people and just see if there's wiggle room around that. Sometimes they'll say yeah if it's a small pet. Sometimes it may just reduce your options for what you can rent. Also, rental history or background checks. Now, this could be a little bit more difficult if you've come from overseas and you don't have any rental history here in Australia. So this was something that we were worried about. Because we came here on a visa, a company-sponsored visa, we were hoping that they'd understand the situation that we were in. So we just talked to them about our situation and how we're sponsored here on a 482 visa and that we'll be here for the next 2 years, etc. That just kind of proves that we will be here for a long-term period. So in addition to that, we sent them employment contracts, we sent them our visa conditions. They can see that we will be able to pay the rent and will be good tenants. So lastly, you have to agree to the bond, and the bond is the deposit. This money goes into the RTA. The RTA is a government organization, so they hold your money, and unlike the Philippines where the bond is taken by sometimes the landlord, your money is actually held by the government. Let me tell you why I'm pleased about that. It's because back home, when we had moved out of John's flat, there was actually this whole thing of trying to chase the landlord for the deposit that we had made, and it was a significant amount of money. It was so hard to chase him, and it was a whole stressful thing, and we had already left. Anyway, we got a part of it back, but without any explanation as to why. Only half of it was returned to us. It was just very annoying and just like stupid. Anyway, so the bond is 4 weeks of your rent. So you will need to have that money available because that's part of what they will be asking for when they accept your application or when you accept their yes to your application. Now, if you're going to a shared house setup naman, I think it's a case-to-case basis. This is only based on what John told me. So you have to be clear on what the terms are. Not all share houses will have a proper agreement. Some of them will, some of them won't. The only thing is that if you don't have a proper agreement, there are certain risks attached to that, and you just have to understand it. Not saying that not having an agreement, they will always be bad roommates, but bear in mind that there are different risks to that. So for us as a couple, of course, we both wanted our own space. We were looking for either a house or an apartment, and we were both earning. It's a dual income household, so we are really past the phase of sharing houses with other people. Personally, I never did either back home. I just lived in a tiny studio apartment when I was in Manila, except for college because I was living in a dorm. But really, it's all about preference and what you're able to afford. Now, the good thing is there are a lot of options for any budget range, so you'll be able to find something that suits your lifestyle and your budget. So good luck. So now just back to applying. I told you that we viewed a few different places in different suburbs, and we actually ended up applying for all three of them because we were told that it's quite competitive, and we were worried that at the end of all these applications we wouldn't have a place to live in, and we really needed a place to live in. We were worried because of that whole rental history, so we just wanted to be sure, and we sent through 3 different applications. In the end though, we actually got all 3 of them, which is quite crazy because they called us all within the same week, and we had to decide because of course they would not be holding that space for us if we weren't going to end up accepting it anyway. In the end, we decided with one that we liked the look of the most, which is this place. And the reason why we really like this is because it doesn't look like a condo. This one's a bit more homey, you know. It has hardwood floors. It has, you can see this dresser came with it, and it's like dark wood furniture, and everything in the house is like this, and it gives me such homey vibe, and it reminds me of my parents' house because living away from family, you want to be in a place where it's a bit more cozy, and this place is definitely cozy, so that's why we ended up choosing this place. Most lessors would want a long-term tenant, and that's only reasonable because they want to make money and they want to make sure they always have business, right? So if you're looking for something more short-term, maybe 6 months or under, you might have a bit more difficulty, but that's not to say that it's impossible. If you're looking for something that's really short-term, like 3 months, I would suggest looking at Facebook groups or Gumtree maybe. I've seen some posts on Facebook groups, and they usually put up posts about short-term rentals, so you might have a better chance there. You could also still check out real estate and just see what's there, but I don't think we ever saw anything short-term. The least we saw was 6 months, and that's actually what we were after in the beginning. We were just looking for a place for the first 6 months. That's because we didn't know yet where I was going to be working, and I would want a place that was quite convenient for me to commute from, because John would be driving. He drives here, so he'd be driving to work, so he'd be able to manage the commute quite easily, whereas I'm going to be taking public transportation, so I wanted a place that was accessible, that had easy access to public transportation. Thankfully though, this place that we are at, they actually allowed us to do 6 months in the beginning. Okay, and obviously the last step is to accept the offer. Once you've accepted the offer, all you'll need to do is do some final checks. I think there was still a bit of paperwork after that, and then we also had to file the bond and pay for the rent. To file the bond with the RTA, you could either do it on their website or you could ask the property agent to do it for you. We had to ask them them to do it for us because at the time we didn't have enough points on our ID. If you are moving to Australia, you'll soon understand what I mean about the point system on the ID. There are ways to make up the points, but just at the time we didn't have enough. We were freshly just landed. So they had to do it for us, but then they also sent us back some paperwork that proves that it's already with the RTA. So we knew that it was there and the bond has been lodged. So legally, we're all set and we're all set to move in. So I guess that's it on all I could cover for this topic. Anyway, I hope I was able to cover some of the questions that you might have about apartment hunting / renting here in Brisbane. And if you have other questions, just let me know in the comment section below. Also, you can find a lot of information online if you just do a quick Google research with pricing, information, rules, etc. That's how we figured it out when we first got here, and we just went from there. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet, and click the bell notification so that you can be notified whenever I upload new videos like this on my channel. And yes, I will see you again in my next video. Bye!